The other thing is, let's see how much time this is for Ila and Surya's first jam session.
All right.
In the field of co-creation. Oh, we are very cute. No, we didn't plan this.
No. Anyway.
Right. So, hi Ila.
Hi Surya.
I'm so excited to have you say, like, the word you used was scribe, and I call you muse, and clarity finder. And I'm sure I could go off on many different things because you are a gem.
Well, it's it's an honor to help you, because I'm so excited to see what comes out, and you are definitely carrying wisdom that I am drawn to and magnetically flying around, so I'm really excited to explore that more.
Me too. Yay. And I'm excited to get it on video, and that way we can have it. Yay. So, darling, you were going to say something, and I said I wanted to get that on video.
Right. You were talking about your process, and and so I guess I wanted to just offer and explain, like, what my intention for this is I want to see kind of just where you're at with your material and information. And I know that what I like to do, I'm a composer. So as a musician, that's like my identity. I'm a composer, and I feel very much like I compose out of the world that I live in. And so what I'm excited to do is gather. Okay. So I want to see your rants, and I want to see all of your, like, pages and pages of disorganized thoughts.
Okay.
And I want to I want to hear you rant, and I want to just see what happens when you just are free to express whatever you want to express. And then I want to, like, dig into that and find the patterns and find the sequences and find, like, the cohesive way to get from here to here, because that's what I love to do. So, yeah.
May this be a very rich journey for this, because I need everything you just said. And I feel that the invitation for us to do this the other day, when I dropped into the writing, it was like, holy shit, actually I'm clear. And I know what I want to create. It's a new compact for our species. So we have the Declaration of I have the Declaration of Interdependence. We have the Declaration of Independence for our society. And I believe that we need to structure our language and consciousness in a way that recognizes how we are embedded in planet Earth, and how we are extensions of planet Earth. We are not separate from planet Earth, and planet Earth needs our collective consciousness as a species to shift its focus in order to take responsibility for our actions personally, socially, and globally, in order for us to transit out of this society that is truly poisoning and killing our planet that we're a part of. And how to do that is, so that there's so many different aspects to what we, individual, social, collective, need to do in order to change the direction and the momentum of what our society is programmed to do, which is capitalism, which is to consume, which is to use the natural world in a way that has domination over. And looking at how those kind of unconscious and conscious collective agreements are based in our ability to disconnect from what we're doing, hurting the earth and each other. And I feel like those aspects of our conditioning to orient around a system that does use violence as the bottom line, that does perpetrate dynamics of punitive, so that the psychology of our species is oriented towards giving power to a governance that holds a top-down system. So at all the borders we need passports because there are guns. And we are separating ourselves, and then as our earth starts to have more and more natural disasters and we have all of these different influxes of chaos and challenge, how are we on a species level going to create governance that isn't going to be authoritarian, that isn't going to use violence as a trajectory because a group of people hold those reins? And so it's like how to actually educate and empower the individual and the psychology of the social constructs to be able to, and now I'm jumping into healing trauma and working, so there's so many.
Okay. I love it. So, yeah, you said a lot of things, and the thing that really caught my attention when you started speaking is Declaration of Interdependence. And I understand where your other ideas are coming from that, because just to reflect back what I'm hearing you say that we're at a place right now where capitalism and consumerism is so much the focal point that the independence that we are celebrating in our culture is actually hurting us, because we're it's every man for himself, we're focused on survival, we're protective, we're like suspicious of everyone around us. And so tell me about what interdependence looks like.
This is really how to. So interdependence comes back to social architecture, which comes back to how do we re-engage with the capacity to heal the history and the self. So interdependence is right relationship with self and other, so that we can feel when we're open to each other, to a system, what feels right, what feels not right. So in interdependence, it's really creating independent, internal, healthy organisms that connect with other organisms that can have the genius of consciousness to be in right relationship. So we're having to redefine our collective psychology to remember how to work with each other, so that we're not creating a police force that demands that they're the ones that if something happens we call.
Right.
We're creating a system where we learn how to call each other on our shit, on our empowerment, and on our genius, so that we transform the relationship from an external judicial system to an internal functional community consciousness that embeds right relationship, that takes back from, like rebuilding a social construct where young babies hang out with older people. Concept.
Yeah.
Crazy. How do we actually take the system of humanity and re-engage in a way that actually is healthy and in right relationship from cradle to grave? It's just like, as a body, once I die, do I go back to the earth for the worms? How do we actually create a system where we use our resources to reconnect with the natural world and not just take from it? And so the interconnectedness comes through reconnecting with our social fabric in a way that heals the collective trauma of being so generationally removed from healthy feedback.
Is that feedback internal?
Internal and external, and conditioned from the way in which we are. When we come into this world, many people say, oh, babies are blank slates. Oh, I don't think so. I think that cellular existence is wise. I think that the body consciousness is wise. I think we are innately full of the history of the universe, and that the aperture of consciousness that culture allows us to breathe into affects the way in which babies grow up, affects the way in which parents parent. So to actually build a system that honors and values listening and creating wise decisions from that through how we are, you know, I mean, and that's up and down the line. And so to me, where I come to a lot of this is through my own healing, through understanding my own biology, through understanding how essential it is to emotionally storm, to not hurt people with my emotions, but to not repress them. To understand that our society has us compartmentalizing our primal nature out of fear of being taken over by it. But the reality is that to be taken over by our primal nature is part of the joy of existence. But how to do that in a healthy way, how to be in our expression in a way that if we get hurt, we understand how to work with our trauma. It's an innate gift we all have. To be conditioned out of that innate gift is what culture most often does. And so reconnecting with our innate a capacity to heal, to grieve, to love, to share is part of the connective tissue that can help change the value structure, that can regain our ability to make choices from a centered place. So it's all about, and then being able to listen to each other and negotiate. And that is where, how do we create a different kind of a governance where a base root is through the negotiation of listening. And, you know, it's like when I get up into the upper echelons of the governments on this planet and the high tension points that are coming down, you know, I just have to breathe into how do we seed and pollinate leadership so that we all recognize the power to choose, and in our choices we choose leaders that are based in collaboration, that are based in healthy human relation, that see bullying in any form as part of this old history that we just want to dry out and put on the shelf and go, oh, look at that shmoo, we survived. You know, because I think that there is so much, and that in the mindset of society, oh, but we've always been this way, is a very limited society, and that I think that is what's going to get us to be a short-lived species, in all honesty. I don't feel like our species, if we don't harness our capacity for our true genius to be the dominant tone over the militarism of society. If we put the money that we're putting into militarism into saving planet Earth and feeding people in a way that we could have this, we could do it. Okay.
Okay. So
us in red. I know
Yes.
we're in. It's just too cute. It's even the same.
you just look so good. I'm hearing you come to that that, what do we call it, prayer to be able to listen more, for example. And my question is, well, there's a couple of things that brings up. So I see that you're saying, like, yes, we need to listen to each other more because we need to collaborate more. That's obvious. You know, we're here as a tribe. We're a lot of humans on this earth, so it makes sense for us to work together. And I'm also hearing you saying there is a innate wisdom of the body that we need to learn how to listen to. And so my question is, you know, I feel, just personally, I feel a complete product of society. I feel so disconnected from that innate wisdom, even though I feel it, like, as much as I can myself. My question is, like, well, how can I trust that everyone's gonna, like, be able to listen correctly to their own wisdom? How would we address that?
La 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 la. Social architecture, community building, collaboration, reform. In leadership and in building out leadership, how to build out social constructs in which we build a different kind of a system. And that system feeds on good facilitation, feeds on self-knowledge. And so that the feedback system, the value system, is changed. It's a different value system. And you're not alone. And that's part of this mission, is this, because there's lots and lots of different systems and individuals and consciousness all putting a flashlight on this kind of behavior as an essential component for our growth. And many people, such as myself, have put their lives into this. You know, this is like the off stream, and we're slowly making our way into mainstream, in the yoga community, in this community, in the healing community, and these different ways, but how to actually build out. And also, there are lots of different summits and like weekends and people. I mean, at least and I know that we're in a subculture of Northern California. Yeah. But, I was in Colorado at a summit that had 50 speakers, and each speaker had a different highlight around how do we do this, and what is this. So for me, what this is it's creating an understanding of what we are debugging, which is authoritarianism, as an aspect of how do we debug the parts of ourselves that hurt through repression or through repressive psychology. And how do we build out collective agreements that work together to build a different kind of cultural landscape? And in that, if you don't feel taken care of, rather than calling the police, you call community council. Right. And then in community council, there's groups of people that hold the space in a different kind of a way that allow for the healing and integration to happen. And so it's no longer punitive. You're not going to be put on trial, judged, and then sent away. If somebody does something and you hurt them, then how do you actually create true reciprocity? How do you actually change the conversation? Say somebody was using some alcohol and hurt somebody driving. Is the right way to deal with that in our society is to put that person away and charge money? Is that, what would actually a healing happen if people changed it from putting it outside to putting it back inside?
What does that look like?
Exactly. What does that look like? That would look like people coming together to have their feelings, to listen to what was lost, and then to build out an ability to find out what would make better a bad situation.
So it'll be individually based. There wouldn't be a code that you follow.
The code would more be like in the community. What would that look like? And there could be different levels to it, because some things would, if somebody actually did violence to somebody else, there would be a different conversation. So there's a way, but how do we redefine it so it's no longer sitting outside of our society, the civil, but actually brought it in. And I think that this vision, if you could jump out of where we are now and put it into 200 years from now, we could, if we aimed for it, have a society that was truly more integrated. Right now, we might still need to have smaller, instead of recognizing we still have a legal system, and that legal system still has teeth. We still have to abide by it. So how do we actually go, okay, that's out there, but how do we build a different kind of agreement process amongst us that actually takes our experiences, and when I get upset, we actually have a community council, and we can call that community council. And in that, building out a system that is oriented towards human relation being a developmental process in the community structure that was aimed towards a healthy community structure. And having that value system start to unpack itself in regards to different kind of self-created protocols. So it's a generative, so what I find is in human relationships, they have a generative quality, they have patterns, they have exchanges, but when you can build something that feeds people over time, like creating a garden together to work on what you lost and what you gained could be an opportunity. And so people are not vilified, but reintegrated.
Okay, cool. So the piece that so far, just like recapping, so far I'm hearing a lot about in a way it sounds to me like this utopian society that you have envisioned.
Mm.
And it sounds great. Sign me up. And then now the last thing you said that kind of piqued my interest is you spoke about a relationship with each other. So like how that plays in our interpersonal relationships, and you said something about like identifying those patterns, and so I want to hear you talk more about that and how that can bring us to that place of community.
How we as human beings relate to each other, and it's like the physics of relationship are, if we have a different kind of social compact over here, one that is oriented towards listening, towards collaboration, towards understanding, like patterns, like somebody might like to get up at 10 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock in the morning and sleep until that. So their pattern is this, somebody else's pattern is that, and building out social dynamics that really serve each individual while they're co-creating in a business or in life, and these things change and transform. But the base note is, how do we actually work towards a healthier way of dealing with our complexity, our love of life, our exchange in humanity, so that we create a different kind of social compact that, and here's the thing, is like the utopian thing, it's like, I probably won't live there, but I sure hope my ... dots down the road have an opportunity to build out a different kind of social compact that transits us out of this system that is killing planet Earth to one that is nurturing planet Earth. So one that is, and in planet Earth you look around and there's so much very hard situations happening. And then on an individual level, hard situations happening internally. And so that there's lots of hard situations from the personal to the social, to the Now how do we start to change? I mean, what if there was this shift in collective agreement that we no longer were trying to protect ourselves from each other, that we use a huge amount of our resources building, aircraft carriers and building, what if we took that kind of intensity and built healthy ways for human beings to grow and work together, and resources were available for the creative arts so that you wouldn't be in survival, but your orientation of creation would be fed. What would happen? And then, and Rex, and you and me both.
Yeah.
And then me, you, and everyone else both.
Yeah.
If the banking system, rather than when we had that crash, we had a system that bailed out the banks. What if they bailed out the individuals?
Right.
I think that it was like, if each American got, I think it was like $230,000 each. It would have been the equivalent of. Now what if money like that was put into a social system that was oriented towards honoring the children, and all of a sudden children were happy and playing, and they had mentors, and rather than you were put in a classroom to learn, that children were given the space to be listened to, and that their creative endeavors, and they were given the technology, and who knows what the fuck they could create. If those, and it was set up that the grandparents and the elders were working, I mean, who knows what kind of magic could be created in that context, and then what kind of a little person would come out as an adult with what kind of wisdom for the rest of the collective. So changing our matrix around how we get things done and how we do things, and the patterns around it. But where do we start is in the value around the relational exchange of human to human and human in nature. So one of the pieces that I was writing about in here and just looking at is that we as a species have those who have built out the power system have done it through the vilification of our primal nature. So slaves, they're not human. So we can use them however we choose. Animals Earth, whatever, women, hey, like, oh, it's not me, you, yeah, we could do, so, oh my God. And then, but if I have that primal nature inside of me, ooh, cut it out. So it goes in all directions. So how do we regain a sense of respect for our innate biology, our innate understanding, and then build that respect out in a way? So it's like building out that respect, and through leadership, because I really believe that it's through leadership, through mentorship, through empowering people individually to stand in the frequency and to help that become what's respected, hand to hand.
So one thing I'm hearing that sounds really interesting is you're talking about creating more respect for that primal nature that we all carry. And if we can actually include and respect that part of ourselves, then we'll be able to include and respect that which is Mother Earth, that which is the random and organic nature of how things are around us. So that sounds cool. So how would we begin to develop a relationship with our primal nature in a safe way?
Well, one of my primary ways of sharing with people is through a belief system of how to help you. Because if you're reading something I wrote, or if you're hearing this, or however it is how do you debug yourself in a way that honors and recognizes what is going on internally. So I think that really the belief system that we walk around with is part of what shifts. If we believe and identify and recognize those places inside that have internalized the collective belief system. So how do we debug that? And it's just like that's part of the leadership and bringing that through. And then I, as a teacher, help to facilitate an embodiment of that consciousness in the work that I offer. And whoever else might resonate with that, but how to support that in the individual and becoming their own, how do people wear it? And I think that more people resonate with this on a certain level when, and it's almost a hidden thing. I think that, like, oh yeah, I talk to my animals.
Right. Yeah.
Ooh, I have those spiritual experiences. Shh, don't tell me.
Yeah.
So I think it's, and for me, to help people work with trauma, and so here's the other angle, is when a community has been traumatized, and that's happening, from mass shootings to natural disasters to wars to all of these different ways, how to create a healing environment and how to bring in, one of my visions is to create a foundation that creates a coalition of people like myself, that an emergency happens, emergency's happening, and it goes through a system, calling team, okay, we've got 20 people who can go spend a month or two in this community environment, and that community environment that has just been highly traumatized has this opportunity. It's almost like, rather than you sending in an army, you send in this, and they go around the system, and then in it, that value structure becomes embedded. Because when people get traumatized and then they're held in love, it's amazing. And so using those as access doors into the collective shift base. So that's part of one of my projects that's actually what the weekend was. And now I'm working on a strategic planning, and I was calling it Stone Soup, and I was doing this and I was doing that, and I'm like, okay, we're postponing it because I need to get the writing done. Yeah. But that's what that one was for. Cool.
So what, okay, as far as, that sounds amazing, and that sounds like what would happen in that utopian society. So as far as...
Oh, no. That would happen if I got money in this society to help build that utopian society.
Exactly. So
I'm like, I want money. I'm like, give me... And at this stage, one of my visions is, in my utopian society, is that we transit out of the symbology of money. In 200 years, may it be so.
Yeah.
Or less.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're moving fast because we don't, but how do we actually transform? And that's part of what I believe this This book, I feel, could give a step-by-step through line to how to get from where we are now to understanding where we need to go, and then how to fucking get there. And that linear understanding of step by step through understanding shamanism, through understanding the biology of the body and trauma, through understanding culture and how culture is created on top of different traumas, through understanding we're at a place in history where the collective zeitgeist, the unconscious undercurrents, we can, like, how do we flip it in the collective psyche that creates epiphanies and ahas and puts on the mantle of, oh, I'm a part of this interconnected movement because, you know, we are, you know, interdependent, and how do we co-create that? And so more and more, so I feel like my thrust is to help support the utopian consciousness, but to me it's more I kind of want to change that languaging from utopian, but there's a truth to it, from utopian to could be the land of Oz, I don't know, it's more, but I feel that we as a species need to shift.
Yes.
We need and that shift, like, you know, needs to happen. And we, you know, how does that happen? We haven't done it yet, and we're kind of like, we got Trump, you know, it's like, no guard man. But how do we go? You're just a shmoo in the collective poo, and becomes a part of our history.
So, okay, this could be my limited understanding. One thing that's coming up as you're speaking about this is, you talked about the authoritarian society, and that's like that's kind of the main problem, is that we're oriented to this, like, this is the right and wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'm punished, and if I'm right, I'm not even noticed, and that's our life. And so my thought is, like, it's been like, yeah, like, it has been like that for a lot of human history, because there have been kings and queens, and before that there have been chiefs, and there have been lots of people in power hurting people with less power.
Yeah.
So that is part of our human psyche, that somehow there is a tendency to be corrupted by power. So if you are creating an interdependent, truly interdependent society where there is nobody in so much power that they're being corrupted, how are we protected from our own psyches that, you know, would allow somebody to do something extremely disruptive?
We would have a system around, you know, it's just like, oh, so-and-so's going on, okay, come on, we got to ground them, come on, everybody, okay, all right.
Call council.
What's going on?
Right.
No, we're not going to let that crazy part be the one that makes the decisions.
Cool, so you're sharing the authority, basically, even equally, so that if...
Yeah, and some people will have more, you know, I mean, here's the thing, I believe that if we actually landed in a social construct of respect and genius combined.
Sounds great.
Right. It's respect and genius. So genius, I think, lives in us all in some way, shape, or form. But it's how to uncover each person's genius, how to unlock each person's feeling of self-worth, of self-love, of co-creation, how to support a system that truly says, I need to take a month in the woods, and people are like, cool.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah.
I need to travel around the world because I don't know what's in my backpack and I want to fill it up with some neat new things. You're like, cool, go. Our system is set up that we get to follow our passions. I feel like helping out at a such and such, doing a such and such. Cool. You know, like the world set up, and this is the utopian, I know it's pretty darn utopian, but yeah, I can't help it. I'm like, part of me is like, maybe I should just write a novel, because maybe this is like too big, but the thing that I see, and this is like, I see it as a deep grid, and I feel it like you have, you know, you have capitalism and you have communism, you have the isms, but I have an ism in here. And this ism feels as if when unpacked, could make sense to other in a way that could help change the societal structure of agreement.
Yep.
So I feel like it makes, like, I can see it, and that's part of like how to make what I see become a congruent understanding of possibility of choice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a whole value system.
Yes.
And it only works if we share the same value system. So those who have a value system of accumulate more and gain and win and be better, how do they benefit?
Well, what if they just went through a natural disaster and their whole world has been taken from them?
Right.
What if they all of a sudden really recognize that their grandkids won't have a planet to breathe on if they don't change? Mm-hmm. What if they recognize that what they've been putting their life into doesn't really serve them in those ways? So I feel that you know what an imaginal cell is, right? Mm-hmm. So inside of a butterfly, sorry. Inside of the caterpillar, who turns into the butterfly, during that time, you know, like they're in this cocoon, and that cocoon, it's like gooey, and it's inside out, and it's like, what the fuck is this going to become? You're just having to trust. It's gooey. And then there are these little things, and they're called imaginal cells. And those imaginal cells help turn that thing into this other thing that flies. You know, so that's where we are, and that's what we are, and that's what we need to do, is we need to help bring out the imaginal cell in the collective field that allows the possibility of us to become the butterflies that we know we're capable of.
Right. Okay, cool. So your claim, and I'm only being like the advocate, you know, but the claim is that the wisdom speaks for itself. It's not like I'm fighting against your value system. It's that you aren't listening to something that is actually true. And that's how we deal with, you know, those people, let's say, or that kind of value system, is by educating and by showing them what's actually better. And so it's inevitable that any human is going to come to realize that what you are offering is better for everybody and for themselves as well.
One can hope.
Yeah.
And then there, you know, and what do you do with those individuals who have been raised to hurt other people because they're not of the same race or color? You know, it's. I feel like there's a lot of psychological brainwashing in our system, and that to be able to create other systems that can love and work with, and it's just like, I don't know how. I mean, let's just say I have my book and it's clear, and I can give it to people, and some people read it and go, oh, utopian. And other people go, ah, utopian. You know? So it just feeds this Gaia mind, this consciousness, this like, I am a imaginal cell.
Yeah.
I need millions of other imaginal cells all vibrating, and the more I can get my imaginal cell vibrating with your imaginal cell, with your wisdom, then this wisdom just becomes a part of the cocoon that helped us transform.
Yeah.
So I'm just wanting to bring, and I call it like my golden thread. I want to help my golden thread of perception help empower this becoming that says, yes, we can make it through this time. And I have this large vision of what that can look like. And then how do we, like, little ways, you know, like the difference between, like, even with you and I. I've had clients, and they pay me money. And then I work on them. And that's a limited relationship. That limited relationship gives and takes. Gives and takes. And it's and in that it builds out in our society. So in my relationship with a few people, you being one of them, I'm like, I won't do that. I'm like, no. I'm relying upon this thing called hot genius.
Right.
Hot genius says we're going to work together. We're going to find that sweet spot where you get my wisdom and I get your wisdom, and we see how we can actually build out something that's better, that's not based in monetary. Monetary may come into it if I make a lot of money, or if you make a lot of money, but it's not coming from the equation of I did this for you for this much money, you give this to me for this much. It's from the equation of we're building something that, wow, like the apples that we pick at the end of the year is going to be such a juicy gifting process that's priceless. And that from that we get to feed ourselves and a lot more. So this is like a very small aspect of the vision. And that's part of it, is how do we change our relationship to life and to support something that actually feeds the heart in a whole different way.
So that so the heart genius piece is really, really important, because we can't conceive of how to do that. We can only really truly listen and feel to be guided on how to do that. So how could you develop your heart genius?
By listening to your heart. That's one way.
Yeah.
And for me, I use that terminology, heart genius, because it's also when you get into, when you're with a group of people and you're creating an organizational dynamic, and then you're sitting around the table and everybody's popping ideas and there's this co-creative dance, and then energetically everybody can feel where their right relationship lands within the project.
Yep.
And in that, and each person can feel it, can recognize the roles, and the roles of respect are developed, and the consciousness. That's another form of heart genius, is in how you actually work collaboratively.
Symbiosis. Right, so it's almost like, like any collaboration, like being in a band. Like, it's very clear what the roles are depending on what instrument you're playing, and everybody is equally important in making the actual song happen. So that sounds cool. So then it's really about empowerment, empowering people to find their role and be comfortable with their role and not wishing that they had someone else's role.
Well, and by creating a system that the roles are not stagnant. You don't become one role. You, in one situation, I'm in one role. In another situation, I'm in a different role. Learning to pass the roles around and learning to be able to listen to which person it belongs to. And if there's a place where, well, I want this role, then there's a process around, well, how do we actually, well, this time I'm going to give it to you. Thank you, that felt right. And then you go, and I'm going to go over here and do this piece, because that's healthy too. So there's
it's so insane to me that like we still have to talk about like things like morals and like things like I mean, this has been going on since the beginning of like religion. Like, religion was the first thing to come along that says like, do this and don't do this, do this and don't do this. In case you're confused, here are the rules.
Right, and if you don't listen to them, then here are your Hail Marys.
Right. And exactly, and so after hundreds of years, thousands of years of all kinds of rulemaking, we're still like, well, what are the rules? Like, what you're talking about is so basic, but why can't we just be like that?
Well, I think you just kind of nailed it, because you can't have that thing outside of you telling you what the rules are.
Yeah.
You have to be internally connected, and that internal connection of right relationship in a system, in an organism. Like, my bladder is relating to my belly, and my belly is relating to here and here and these different parts. I'm not thinking about it consciously, but right relationship occurs. But when you have rules and roles that are put on top of you, then the person is going to rebel, react, be repressed, or an authority is going to make the child do this, and that creates a very intense internal process for child to be raised in. So what are you raised in matters.
Yes.
And are you raised in an environment of should? Are you raised in an environment of guilt and shame? Are you raised in an environment of repression? Are you raised by traumatized parents who are raised by, and then you're getting a very twisted, unconscious, reactionary pain body that came and started from great down the road, and you're pulling these, and they're creating this, even though the parents are like, oh, my baby. But there's these undercurrents that sift in there because of this distorted way in which conditioning has been passed on. And the reason why we're still having, well, what is this? Because there's a distortion around religion telling someone how to do it.
Because there's an external orientation rather than an internal orientation.
Among other things.
And that...
And a society that supports that for control.
Mm-hmm, right. And also it's just like so based in fear too, because we need the external to tell us what to do, because we can't even trust ourselves and we can't trust each other.
Because we haven't been taught self-trust.
Yeah.
And so how do you teach self-trust?
How do you teach self-trust?
By creating a space where you honor an individual. You honor honoring, it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm just going to let you go do your thing. But I think that in our world, we don't really have respect for the innate wisdom inside.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of fear.
We can't trust the innate wisdom inside.
So.
Hi.
So I did actually spend some time writing some of this stuff out,
Cool.
but not all of it. Anyway.
Okay.
So. Hello.
Whoa.
Yeah. No. Let's see.
Dope.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
That was a little too exposing.
So I'm gonna actually stop it.
Yeah.
And go pee.
That's good.